morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another data analysis session brought to you by UrBizEdge. For today's session, we are having contributing to NumPy, a roadmap for newcomers, and our special guest is Inessa Pawson. So this session was brought by the collaboration between MHX Analytics and also UrBizEdge, by the partnership between MHX Analytics and also UrBizEdge. So for some of you that might be interested in taking data analysis training in Canada. So their motto is basically they are committed to giving their clients the business intelligence edge they need using tools they already have, such as Excel, Power BI, financial modeling, and so many other tools. So if you're located in Canada, you might be interested in taking data analysis training, you can check out MHS Analytics International. For us, UrBizEdge, we're registered Microsoft Excel consulting, financial modeling, business intelligence, and also data analysis and enterprise solution firm in Nigeria. We also specialize in helping companies and high-value professionals be on top of the business data. We're also the developer of some data analysis tools which you can find on Microsoft Office Store, such as the Nigerian Finance Market Analysis tool, which is available on Microsoft Office Store. We're also the developer of the Nigerian Stock Analysis Dashboard. We're also a training company, so these are some of our upcoming training. So our special guest, Inessa, right? So she as a contributor experience lead for NumPy project. Inessa has helped contributors find the paths in open source, passionate about transformative power of collaboration out of the open source. She has been organizing and maintaining summits at PyCon US since 2020 to foster the best practice on how to maintain and develop sustainable open source projects and thriving communities. Originally from Ukraine, Inessa now resides in Southwest Florida, United States, where she is the co-founder of Sarah Impact, a non-profit organization to widen the tech talent pipeline and encourage innovative and economic diversity in all regions. So I'll stop sharing my screen. With no further ado, I'll hand over the session to Inessa. So Inessa, what's to you? So I'm going backstage now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy, for the presentation. And thank you for inviting me to speak about one of my favorite topics, contributing to open source. I have a small request for Timo, for you or somebody on your team. I don't seem to figure out how to use my both monitors at the same time, which would be very important for this presentation. So if you don't mind, I share the link with you to my presentation on Canva. It's in the chat.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I've seen it.
Yes, so if you open it and then maybe you could share it on your screen, I'll just say next when we transition to the next slide.
Oh, awesome. It's fine. So I'll share it right now. So I'm sharing it right now.
Okay, that's it. Yes, thank you. I apologize, I don't use Microsoft Teams at all, and I've never presented them, obviously.
It's so, fine.
This will be the best workaround. Yes, super excited about talking about contributing to open source, starting your journey in open source. Becoming an open source volunteer contributor has changed entirely the course of my professional career. And even though my presentation will be focused on contributing to NumPy, this roadmap on how you can start contributing to open source is true for almost any open source project. I officially stepped into the role of the Contributor Experience Lead slightly over a year ago. Before that, I was an active contributor to NumPy for 2.5 years as part of the web team, survey team. I was also helping with fundraising, policy making, event organizing, and the community outreach to the groups underrepresented in tech. So here is the plan for the next 30 minutes. First, I'll give a brief overview of NumPy, its past and present as software and the community, and then you'll learn how you could start contributing to NumPy. Next slide, please.
At the next slide.
Yes, so the next slide is good. I'm just going to. So what is NumPy? NumPy is an open source Python library that is a de facto standard for multidimensional arrays in Python data science. In other words, nearly every data scientist working in Python draws on the power of NumPy. NumPy offers comprehensive mathematical functions, random number generators, linear algebra routines, Fourier transforms, and much more. It lies at the core of a very rich ecosystem of data science libraries. And in this slide, I've included a diagram to give you an idea what libraries depend on NumPy. If you're familiar a little with the Python data science, you might recognize, well, you're likely to recognize some of the other libraries like Pandas, scikit-learn, PyTorch, and so on. It's estimated that NumPy has 10 to 15 million users worldwide. A few words about the genesis of this library. NumPy was created by Travis Oliphant, who was one of the presenters at your meetup group earlier this year. And he's a software engineer and a businessman who is also one of the creators of SciPy, another foundational library for data science with Python. He's also a co-founder of Anaconda, a distribution platform for Python, Julia, and R programming languages for scientific computing. NumPy was created as an effort to unify the Python community around a single array package. NumPy 1.0 was released in 2006. So in the life cycle of open source libraries, NumPy is considered a mature project. Next slide, please. NumPy development has always been driven by its community. We strive for all project decisions to be made by consensus of all interested contributors. The primary goal of this approach is to ensure that the people who are most affected in any given change can contribute their knowledge. We believe that a thoughtful review from a broad community is the best mechanism for creating high-quality software. Discussions happen on the mailing list, GitHub, and during community calls that are open to everyone. Furthermore, we are powered by our community. The project is maintained by 8 core developers, most of whom are volunteers. Yet, as you can read in this social thread, in this social media announcement, over 177 individuals contributed to the last NumPy release, NumPy 1.24. Our contributors are awesome. And if you're on LinkedIn or Twitter, please follow us. Just a few more words about the governance of NumPy. NumPy has a steering council that consists of project contributors who have produced substantial and sustainable contributions. The overall role of the council is to ensure the long-term well-being of the project, both technically and as a community. During the everyday project activities, council members do not have any special power or privilege through their membership on the council. We also have several work groups that we call teams for focused collaborative efforts to develop, improve, or maintain a specific part of the NumPy project. And here on the slide, I listed all the teams that we currently have and also soon to be added. So we have maintainers team, documentation, web team, survey team, and triage and translations team are going to be added very soon. Next slide, please. So what is the best way to start contributing to NumPy? It's the question that I get asked quite often these days. Truth to be told, there is no one true best way to make your first contribution to NumPy or any open source project. It depends on the combination of your skill set and the project needs. If you're a technical writer, translator, a graphic designer or a statistician, your path to the first contribution is likely to be different than that of a software engineer. I will say, though, it is best to start small. Next slide, please. Well, let's talk about different ways you can contribute to NumPy. It's interesting. This slide was updated, but it's not showing as updated. Okay. Since I'm speaking to a group of data analysts and data scientists, I'll start with the options where you could possibly apply your knowledge of data science. You could help us by filing issues. If you're a NumPy user, you're pretty familiar with NumPy documentation. While it's very good, given the size and age of the NumPy project, it's not perfect. So if you have a suggestion to improve it, please file an issue to let us know. I recommend first searching the issue tracker to make sure that there isn't a similar issue filed already. If there is, it's best to avoid duplicates and share your thoughts in the comments section of the existing issue. And in some instances, a maintainer reading your comment might recommend opening a separate issue. So let's see how it happens in practice. And now I'm just, we're going to switch to one more slide, and then we'll have to move to GitHub, because all our collaboration happens on GitHub. So let's say you are reading the NumPy documentation about the NumPy function, NumPy gen from txt, and found the usage example not very helpful. You may let us know by commenting, by filing an issue and leaving a comment. And since most of our collaboration happens on GitHub, as I mentioned, we'll now do a little bit of a switching between tabs, and I guess those who are in charge of managing the screen, and we'll continue on GitHub. So Tammy, you can stop sharing, and okay. I will take over.
Okay, so stop sharing right about now. So you can share your screen.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So you can see the presentation with the names, right? And now if I switch to NumPy documentation, can you see my screen with NumPy documentation? Yes, no?
Documentation, I think.
Okay. So what do you see on the screen now?
Okay, I see Sean P. Goggins, PhD, Socially Computing Existence. Is that what you want to see?
No. Oh, gosh, this is terrible. No, this is not what, I don't know what was the sentence. This is not the slide that you need to look at. Okay, how are we going to do this? I think we'll just stick to the slide deck then.
What if that one was in a different window? If you bring it to this screen, will it show? Do you think it will show?
Well, I just switched.
Okay, I see numpy.reg from regex, numpy.from regex. Is that the screen you want us to see?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So okay, it's good. It's working out.
Okay, very good. So, yes, to my point about the function that you might be using in your work, which is a pretty common function, NumPy gen from txt. We'll go to this function. Yes, that's the one I'm discussing. And again, if you're an NumPy user, it's very common for you to refer to this to this part of the numpy.org for all the references regarding the official NumPy documentation. So you're working on it, and you're trying to do something that you have never done before, referring to the documentation, and you came across the example that is not very helpful. To let us know how we can improve the NumPy documentation, you can file an issue. And if you don't use GitHub often, which is pretty common for data scientists, you can click on this link that will take you directly to the source code. And now we are on GitHub, right? Do you see a different screen now? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just don't see
No worries.
anyone on the
my
screen.
Computer on it so that I can answer quicker. Sorry. But yes, you see great.
Okay.
So as a side note, the NumPy source code and documentation are located in the same repository. If you are familiar with Python data science libraries, this will probably not be news for you, but if you are not, then just keep in mind that it's not that unusual that the documentation and the source code are found in the same repo. So how do you let us know? You go to the issue tracker, and to do that, I'll open a new tab, github.com, then we'll go to the repo, NumPy, and this is how you know you're in this repo over here. And you go to the issue tracker, which is this. You probably noticed that now the NumPy issue tracker has over 2,000 issues. This is a challenge for a project of our size and the age, is that there are lots of questions that can be related to usage, which is not exactly the best place to file your issue. But hey, people sometimes don't know of any other places to file a usage issues. They file it on GitHub. Well, to our to our defense, we have well over 9,000, nearly 9,500 issues closed. So you can see that it's quite a busy part of our GitHub repo. To file a new issue, you would click on this green button, New Issue, and then you see there are several templates: bug report, documentation, feature request, post-install important issue, report a security vulnerability, question, help, support, development-related matters. This helps our triagers and soon-to-be triage team identify what part of the project this issue belongs to. Since we are going to file an issue related to the NumPy documentation, we will use the template titled documentation. And we click on Get Started. And now you will notice that the template is immediately populated in the title with the prefix DOC, that stands for doc, documentation. And also there is a label that automatically applied, also indicating to our team that this issue will be related to the documentation. Then sometimes you will fill out both sections of the documentation issue template, but not always. For example, you have you have a concern, a suggestion to improve the documentation, but you don't know how. So then you might leave idea or request for content empty, or vice versa. Is that, well, usually if you have an issue and you have a solution, then both sections are filled out. But just keep in mind that it's not always applicable to your situation that both sections are filled out. Now, going back to the issue tracker, as I pointed out, that there are 2,000, nearly 2,000, this is a rounding, 1,984 issues open on the NumPy main repo. So before we file a new issue, let's see if there is an issue that is similar, if not identical, to the request that we would like to make. So I'm going to type NumPy gen from txt, which is the name of the function that we're going to file an issue about, and see if there is anything that is similar to what we were going to ask for. And we see that there have been 17 issues filed altogether, 12 were closed, and 5 is still open. So by going through the titles of each issue, we can tell that there is not exactly the same issue that we were about to file, which is to improve the example, the usage example of this function. So this would be a safe way to proceed to file a new issue. And then while we are at it, if you noticed, quite a few issues filed don't have a prefix. And this is something we're strongly asking all our contributors to do, to use prefixes. What part of NumPy, of the NumPy code base, an issue is related. For example, here, this one has a label but doesn't have a prefix, which is helpful but not ideal that there is no prefix. And something that I would have to go back and fix after this presentation. So this is how you would file an issue to the NumPy project. And if you come across an issue in other parts of NumPy, for example, something on our website, then you would need to go to a different repo titled numpy.org, and there is a separate issue tracker. As you can tell, this issue tracker has far fewer issues. Yes, so something to keep in mind that there are multiple repos within the NumPy project. For example, another one that if you're studying NumPy, you might refer often, called NumPy tutorials. And also, as you can tell, this is a new repo and has fewer issues. So this is sort of one-on-one on how to submit an issue to the NumPy project. Now we are going to return to the slide deck, and Tammy, I will need your help with that.
Okay, so I'm coming, just minutes. Okay. Okay, let me share my screen now. Sharing a window. Okay, so tell me if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's continue. Next slide, please. Before we get on with all the ways where you can contribute to NumPy, I should also mention that if you have a suggestion how to improve an example. So not just a concern that this is not a helpful example for someone new to using the function, but you're actually using this function and have working examples. This is a great opportunity for you to make a contribution with a pull request, and we'll get to it in just a bit. But continuing with the list of all the ways you can contribute to NumPy, you probably not a stranger to data analysis if you are a data scientist or working with in data analytics. So conducting a user survey or helping to conduct one would be a great way to contribute to NumPy. You also can develop educational material. For example, you are studying NumPy or using NumPy in your studies, and you have an idea for a tutorial or a how-to guide. I would highly recommend connecting with our NumPy documentation, with the NumPy documentation team. And we have two co-leads, Mukulika and Ross. We host bi-weekly meetings dedicated to the NumPy documentation. It would be a great place to ask your questions, how you could contribute to the documentation, including education materials. So I recommend first asking our docs team leads if there is a need for the tutorial or any type of education material that you have in mind. And once you get the green light, then you can start working, and your contribution will be added to the numpy.org, either to the official documentation or to the NumPy tutorials repo. You can also review pull requests. That task requires some knowledge of NumPy, of the NumPy code base, but hey, just keep in mind that this is something that we would welcome as well. As I mentioned, triaging issues is something that I do. We are putting together a team who would focus on doing just that. It's very helpful for our maintainers to have our issues organized. Some of the issues are duplicates, some are related to the bugs that are no longer existing, so reproducing those bugs and making sure that they're still there is a great way to help the NumPy project. Also, contributing to graphic design to NumPy. This is a skill that is very rare in the scientific Python community. So if you are someone who does it for fun or for work and would like to contribute to open source, please keep in mind that you don't have to be a coder or a data scientist to contribute to NumPy or any open source project. Also, translations. We've been focusing on engaging with people from users and potential users from other parts of the world. As I mentioned, the NumPy library started in the US. Early on, contributors to NumPy were also based in North America, but not all. We had a few contributors from Eastern Europe. And now that we have more bandwidth to focus on the community outreach, I'm happy to say that we have contributors from every part of the globe. As a matter of fact, our first developer in residence is based in Egypt, which is considered North Africa, right? Yes, so
yes.
So this is about all the ways you can contribute to NumPy. And now to the next slide, please. before we start talking about submitting a pull request, I think it's worth mentioning what NumPy looks like under the hood. As you can see on the slide, the NumPy code base is written in several programming languages, mainly Python and C. C can be a little discouraging at first for newcomers. Good news is that there's plenty of work to do in the Python in the code base written in Python. Next slide, please. Okay. So this part also unfortunately didn't get updated, but we can still talk about it. Submitting changes to the NumPy source code, including documentation, requires some prerequisite knowledge. And you would imagine that would be true for any volunteer opportunity. It's just when you contribute to open source, the prerequisite knowledge usually entails technical knowledge. So you need to have some familiarity with Git and GitHub, since this is where the source code is located. You also need to know how to build NumPy development environment and NumPy documentation. As I mentioned, the NumPy documentation is embedded in the NumPy code base, so all the rules that are applicable to the code base also extended to the NumPy documentation. NumPy contains parts written in C and Python that need to be compiled before use. Since large parts of the NumPy main documentation are obtained from NumPy via import NumPy and examining the doc strings, you will need to first build and install it so that the correct version is imported. NumPy has to be rebuilt and reinstalled every time you fetch the latest version of the repository before generating the documentation. This ensures that the NumPy version and the Git repository version are in sync. As far as dependencies, we currently use Sphinx along with Doxygen for generating the API and reference documentation for NumPy. In addition, building the documentation requires the Sphinx extension plot directive, which is shipped with matplotlib. Matplotlib is another foundational library in the scientific Python ecosystem. We also use NumPy doc to render doc strings in the generated API documentation. So the documentation that you saw earlier, in the nice format on the white screen, in the white background, and you think that it's on numpy.org, technically it's not. It's embedded in the code base, and what you see is the rendering of it. So to make any changes, you have to go to the code base. But the magic that makes us to believe that it's part of numpy.org is called NumPy doc. The SciPy library also needs to be installed since some parts of the documentation require SciPy functions. I know it sounds intimidating, but there is a solution that has drastically lowered the entry barrier to contributing to NumPy, and it's called code spaces. And this is where the change didn't happen on the slide deck. So we used to have Gitpod as the solution, and then this was Docker was one of the dependency, and since Docker introduced some not so friendly practices to open source, we had to scrap that as a solution for our newcomers to build NumPy. And currently we are using code spaces, and I will have to show on my screen how we can do that using code spaces. The good news is that it's even easier than Gitpod because you don't even have to leave your account on GitHub to do that. Next slide, please. While we're talking about usage examples, I would like to mention a few words about what makes a good usage example in a docstring. The examples should be concise, but descriptive enough to explain the functionality of the object being described. If possible, they should cover corner cases, show all keywords in action, and mention the interpretation of results. A general guideline is to have anywhere between 1 to 3 examples in docstrings, usually ordered from most simple to more complex ones. This helps readers pick the one closest to their use case. And sometimes it's also useful to mention why a specific example is being mentioned and what it aims to teach or show. So again, if you're working with NumPy documentation and you think that the usage example is lacking, give us share with us your examples. We would love to see how you use NumPy. The next slide, please. Okay. This is, I guess I kind of covered everything that is related to all the ways you can contribute to NumPy. With that, how much time do we have left?
Yeah. We have roughly 18 minutes. Okay. 18 minutes.
Okay, so yes, let's just very briefly switch to GitHub, and for that I will need to share my screen.
So I've stopped sharing now.
Thank you, and I will start sharing. Okay.
Okay, we can see your screen.
Okay, and can you see
GitHub?
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, NumPy.
Beautiful. So again, it's very important to keep in mind that different parts of NumPy, of the NumPy documentation specifically, are located in different parts, in different repos on GitHub. If we are talking about docstrings, and that was the beginning of our conversation related to the NumPy documentation, then we will be looking into the code base of the NumPy. We call it main repo, NumPy. And if you feel intimidated to build a development environment on your local machine, one solution that we can offer is code spaces. And to start that, you click on this green button, code. Oh, I'm sorry. One important thing to keep in mind is that if you start contributing to NumPy, you need to work off your fork. So this is NumPy official, the main repo, but as a contributor, you never push your code changes directly to this repo. What you do instead, you go to your fork, and to do that, let me see what would be the fastest way. Yes. So if you're paying attention to my screen, you will see there are 8,000 plus forks of the NumPy repo, and one of them, since I'm logged into my account, is mine. So I'll go to Inessa Pawson NumPy, and now I can start thinking how I would like to contribute to the code base. A good practice is always working on the fork that has been synced with the main fork. So to do that, you to click on the button sync fork. You see this one is out of date. there are 171 commits from the upstream repository. So I'm going to update the main branch on my fork. Now that it's up to date, I can start working on a pull request. And when we click on the green button, we have a dropout menu, code spaces, and then you can see, if you've never used code spaces before, you will not see the second part because this is the code space that I used 2 weeks ago. This is a didactic space guide, is a random name of the code space. It's pretty entertaining. But what you do, you can revive the old code space or start a new one. I prefer always starting a new one, so we will just delete this one. And now you see that no code spaces, right? This is what likely you will see. And create code space on main. Yes, I'm clicking this button. It will open a new page for me. And it will start setting up a code space. This takes some time, but at some point you will see that it's ready to build. And keep in mind that GitHub code spaces are integrated with VS Code. So to use code spaces, you need to use VS Code. So for the sake of time, we will go back to the slide deck. And if we have a little bit of time at the end, I will show you how your development environment will look once the code space is built. So Tammy, I will need your help to go back to the slide deck.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen.
Okay.
So I'm sharing my screen now.
Great.
So it's up. Can you see my screen?
I don't think it's up.
Oh. Come in. What about now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So just to refresh your memory, because I know it's a lot of information in 1 hour, this slide deck lists all the ways you can contribute to NumPy. And I hope something piqued your interest. If you're still unsure where to start or how your skills fit in, you can reach out to me via Twitter or LinkedIn. And if you're unsure that NumPy is the right community for you, why not to join one of our community events? And please, let's move to the next slide. Yes. Thank you. As you can tell, the NumPy contributor community has a pretty busy events calendar. Our documentation team meets on a bi-weekly basis. As I mentioned earlier, Ross and Makulika are leading the docs team. And we not only meet bi-weekly, but we also alternate the time of our meetings to allow contributors from every part of the world join. As I jokingly say, the sun never sets on NumPy. The best way to follow the community events calendar is either subscribe to it on Google Calendar, and I will provide this link during the Q&A, or subscribe to the mailing list where we announce every meeting about 3-4 days before the meeting. I highly recommend subscribing to a calendar. I feel that that helps me to plan my work days better when I see the time slot already taken up on my calendar. So again, all the community events are open to the public. everyone is welcome to join and contribute to conversation. And if you don't feel like contributing yet, that's absolutely fine. You know, it's a complex project, and listening to conversations and learning is still a way for you to get to the point where you could start contributing. Let's see. Next slide. I think this will be the last slide. If you would like to connect with me after this presentation and learn more about the NumPy project, how you can contribute to the NumPy project, or how you can contribute to other projects in the scientific Python ecosystem, please connect with me on Twitter and GitHub. I also would like to mention that my current role as a Contributor Experience Lead is funded by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and we truly appreciate their continuous support of our ecosystem. That's all as far as my presentation. We can quickly check on the code space, see where we got.
So stop sharing my screen.
Yes, thank you. And I can share my screen because the code space is ready. Okay. So if you remember, I was on my fork, Inessa Pawson, NumPy. Then I click this button. Still not showing the code space. So there's one open code space now, but this is how I got to this. So this is how the code space will look in your browser. And if you work with VS Code, then you feel right at home. You have exactly the same icons. Everything is identical to your environment on the VS Code. The only difference is that this is done on the web browser, not on your local machine. Okay, so this is your preview readmd, right? Something that you will also see on GitHub NumPy repo. And these are all the files that are in the code base. So let's see, we were working on this on the function, and we were able to get to it by clicking. We were looking at the documentation, and then we clicked on source, and it took us to GitHub, to the main repo, and to the part of the documentation that covers the doc string that covers this function. Now, if we want to make any changes, as I mentioned, we cannot push it directly to the main repo. We need to work off our fork. So what we will do, we will get to the file npyo.py. So this will be just a moment. I think I'm right. Yes. Okay. So we are in NumPy, right? And then you can see there are quite a few folders, and we are in lib, right? And then we need to find the file that contains the function that we would like to make a suggestion for. And here it is. So this is the file, right? And this pop-up is a suggestion to add additional features that would optimize your work. So I'm just going to make this a little bigger for us to see. So this file as you can tell by the line of the function that we were looking at, is pretty big. 1730 is the line where the docstring is. So we have to scroll all the way down. The more. We can do that with some command lines, but I'll show you the hard way before you do the easy way. I feel like you appreciate better when you know why we do certain things, use certain. Interesting. Am I in the right file? I feel that this was modified not that long ago, and okay. Another way to find it would be to find the function that we are after, and that was gen from txt. Right. Okay, so this is if you notice, there is a mismatch between the lines, and here is why. NumPy, as all software, lives by releases, but we're also, in the meantime, all the changes go to the development branch, and this is where it is. So when you push your pull request, and even when your pull request is merged until the next release, you will not see the changes in the official documentation. So whatever you submit within the next few days will not show on 124 because that's release has been already out. So your changes will be in the development branch of the documentation, and they will make it to the official NumPy documentation with the next release, which happen on a 6-month basis. So again, this is something to keep in mind, that we are working with development branch. Yes, so this is your file. This is where you will be making changes, and these are all the examples that you make changes to, and then you will follow a normal procedure where you push your changes to the pull request to the main repo. I will stop talking the pull request now, and I will open up. I see we're completely at time. I will allow still 10 minutes or so for Q&A. Stop sharing.
So I have
Okay. Can say something?
I have a question, and just to let our audience to know, if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand, and we will promote you as a speaker so you can be able to speak. And if you want to type it in the chat box, you can. So, Inessa, my question is, when I was making the announcement to a lot of people, I also told them that, just like what you said, not so many people might get that confidence. And I like that you mentioned that they can even join the bi-weekly meetings and observe, and from there gain confidence and get to see how things are done and where they can come in. Thank you very much for that. The other thing I would like you to talk about is, so I know there was that slide that shows all the ways we can contribute, but if you can single out maybe one or two that is the easiest for someone who, one, maybe doesn't yet have the confidence, but might already have knowledge of been using NumPy intensely, so is familiar with the tool, can probably be able to give some meaningful suggestions, but it's just a matter of confidence and where easily the opinions are easy to share. So what kind of what will you recommend a person to? Okay, you can find this as a safe and easiest way to make contributions. One of the things you mentioned, if you can pick out one or two that are the easiest for newcomers to contribute to.
I would say it depends on the skill set, but if you're already an advanced user of NumPy, see how you can help us improve the NumPy documentation. And the reason I suggested the example was the usage example in the NumPy documentation, because that's something that we don't necessarily have a lot of expertise. Software engineers are not data scientists usually, definitely not the case for most of our core developers. And also, given the fact that NumPy is used across so many industries, it is truly impossible for us to know all the instances of NumPy applications. So this expertise is very valuable to the NumPy development team, and I think this is something that is a good first step to contribution to the NumPy project.
Thank you. Just to let you give a bit more, from your own expertise knowledge. So there are some, I know that also for me personally, I've been able to occasionally contribute in things, that I use, and, I might not be able to contribute at a very high technical level, but as example, one, create in the tutorial side, creating a bit more examples that maybe leverage the new features to some methods or functionalities that had been added to NumPy. Two, I don't know if you use a lot of visuals in the tutorials or documentation, but for some projects that I know they did that, I was able to get out screenshots, get out images for them to put. So this one was for a Microsoft, not NumPy, but I'm just saying, do you think that are something that can be useful? Someone creating a bit of tutorials around some of the new methods or things that are new features or things that were not probably given examples to already in the tutorial side of the documentation. Are there those things that also apply to NumPy?
When it comes to adding new features, this is unfortunately not the case for NumPy. NumPy being a mature project and also a foundational library, a dependency for thousands of projects in the ecosystem, our priorities are interoperability and dependability. And that means that we have to be very careful and pretty restrictive on what we introduce to NumPy. Very often the ideas for features, so we call them enhancements, are either not accepted or recommended to be added to the upstream libraries. When it comes to improving educational materials or suggesting new ideas for educational materials, yes, there are plenty of opportunities there. We are always open to more educational materials. This is the conversation that is best to have at one of the NumPy documentation team meetings. Also, I recommend going on the issue tracker for the NumPy tutorials, so in the separate repo that I shared earlier, and see if there is something that you could address. Again, issue tracker is not only issues, not only bugs, it's also a way to document ideas. And that would give you a good understanding of what you could work on immediately. Those are my suggestions.
Thank you. Temidayo, over to you.
Okay. So thank you. If you have any question, you can just put it in the chat box. So while we're waiting for questions, the last two questions I asked you, I started your own contribution journey, and also what advice for people just starting out in the field of contribution. So I think you can answer that.
Well, I must say I'm somewhat an outlier in the scientific Python community, and I feel this gives me an opportunity to talk about contributions outside of the submitting pull requests outside the code base. It also well, I'll just share my story, and then you will understand how open source community truly works. I happened to be at the Scientific Python Community Conference in Austin, Texas in 2019. And the first few people I met at that conference were NumPy core developers. They were about to start the redesign of numpy.org, the official website of the NumPy project, and we're actively looking for contributors with relevant skills. And for those of you who are not familiar with the scientific Python community, the average skill set in that community is somebody who is a scientist and who is using the Python data science tool stack in their research. So web development, user research expertise are very rare. And yet there was this need to update the website, and I tell you, there are still plenty of websites in this in the ecosystem that could use these skills. So I joined the team to help with the redesign of the website, and my first contribution to NumPy was not to the NumPy main repo. As a matter of fact, I did not submit a single pull request to the NumPy main repo until I stepped into the role of Contributor Experience Lead.
Wow.
So you need to assess your skill sets. You also need to talk to open source projects or pay attention to the announcements and see where there is a synergy. So yes, my very first contribution to NumPy was related to updating the navigation bar on numpy.org, but that pull request was a combination of sort of it was preceded by many weeks of discussions on mapping out stakeholders, evaluating existing information, and developing content for new information that would be added to the website. Yes, so this was my journey in open source, and I recommend not being intimidated or discouraged if you are not immediately ready to contribute to the code base. Yes, talk to the projects you're using, talk to the projects that you're interested to contribute, and see if there is a synergy in your skills and their needs.
Oh, wow, wow. Okay. So, if there's, I think I actually like the way you got into open source and everything. Because for me, I was always thinking that, oh, you have to contribute on GitHub, you have to like contribute to a code, and you actually explained everything. Okay, so I think I'll try my hands one of these days on open source. Okay, maybe as a technical writer or something. So if you have any question, everyone, can you just put it in the chat box, or you can raise your hands. I'll make you a speaker. And also, Inessa, I'll say thank you for honoring our invitation. And I know it was like a short notice and everything, but I want to say thank you so much. If there's no question, I think I'll be ending the section right about now. So let me stop right. Okay, you want to say something? Sorry.
You can stop the recording, but something that I
Okay.
wanted to mention also, for those of you who are interested to contribute